The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Dusty Rose Saloon, sending up a cloud of red Arizona dust that coated everything within 10 feet. Martha Henderson pressed her handkerchief to her nose and peered out the window at what would be her new home. Redemption Springs, population 247, according to the faded sign at the edge of town. "Last stop, ma'am," the driver called down. "Need help with your trunk?" "I can manage, thank you," Martha replied, though the weight of her carpet bag alone made her arm ache. She'd learned long ago not to expect help or kindness from strangers. At 28 years old, and what her Aunt Constance had called abundantly figured, Martha had grown accustomed to disappointed looks and whispered comments. She stepped down from the coach, her sensible brown traveling dress catching on the step. As she tugged it free, she heard the snickers from the men lounging outside the saloon. Heat that had nothing to do with the desert sun crept up her neck. "Lord have mercy," one of them drawled. "Someone order a breeding sow." Martha's jaw clenched, but she kept her eyes down and moved toward her trunk. She'd heard worse, much worse. In Boston at her cousin's wedding, she'd overheard the minister's son tell his friends, "Martha Henderson, too fat to be loved, too plain to be bedded, and too poor to be pitied." The words had carved themselves into her heart like initials on a tree. That was why she'd answered the advertisement for a cook at the Bar W Ranch, 300 miles from Boston, from her aunt's charitable sighs, from the men who looked through her as if she were made of glass. Here, at least, she could be useful. Here, she could disappear into her work and stop pretending she'd ever be anything more. "You, Miss Henderson?" The voice was deep and rough, like whiskey over gravel. Martha looked up and found herself staring at a man's chest, a very broad chest covered in a worn chambray shirt. Her gaze traveled upward, past a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, past lips that looked like they rarely smiled, to eyes the color of a storm rolling across the prairie. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed to span half the street. His dark hair curled beneath his hat, and his hands, resting on his belt, were scarred and capable-looking. Everything about him spoke of strength and control, and he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Yes, I'm Martha Henderson." She straightened her spine, refusing to shrink. "Are you Mr. Walsh?" "No, ma'am. Jake Brennan, foreman of the Bar W. Mr. Walsh sent me to fetch you." He moved past her and lifted her heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Wagons this way." Martha followed, acutely aware of her body taking up space, of the way her hips swayed when she walked, of the men still watching from the saloon steps. She heard one of them say something and the others laugh, but Jake Brennan's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Any of you boys got something to say it to me." The laughter died. Martha glanced back to see Jake standing perfectly still, one hand on her trunk, the other hanging loose at his side near his holstered gun. The men suddenly found their boots very interesting. "That's what I thought," Jake said quietly, then continued to the wagon without another word. Martha climbed up onto the seat, her heart hammering. No one had ever defended her before. Not her aunt, not her few friends, certainly not any man. She didn't know what to make of it. The ride to the ranch took an hour, most of it in silence. Martha watched the landscape roll by, endless sky, red rocks jutting up like broken teeth, scrub brush clinging to life in impossible places. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. "First time out west?" Jake asked finally. "Yes, it's very open." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "That it is. Some folks can't stand it. Say it makes them feel small." Martha considered this. "I think I like it. There's room to breathe." This time he did smile, just a little. "Yes, ma'am, there is that." The Bar W Ranch sprawled across a valley between two mesas. The main house was solid adobe, weathered but well-maintained, with a wide porch and green shutters. To the left stood a large barn and several outbuildings. Horses grazed in a nearby corral, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's lovely," Martha said, and meant it. "Mr. Walsh will be pleased to hear it. He's real proud of this place." Jake helped her down from the wagon, his hands firm and steady on her waist. For a moment they were close enough that she could smell horse and leather, and something else. Sage, maybe. His eyes met hers, and again she saw that unreadable expression. Then he stepped back and cleared his throat. "Kitchen's through the back. I'll fetch your things." The kitchen was a dream, a massive cast-iron stove, long wooden counters, shelves stocked with supplies, and windows that let in floods of golden light. Martha ran her hand over the smooth counter and felt something inside her chest unknot. "You must be Miss Henderson." Martha turned to find a small, wiry man with white hair and a wide smile. "Samuel Walsh at your service. Welcome to the Bar W." "Thank you for hiring me, Mr. Walsh. The kitchen is wonderful." "Should be. I built most of it myself when my Eliza was alive. She loved to cook." His eyes went distant for a moment. "Been 10 years now, and I still can't make a decent meal to save my life. The boys have been suffering through my attempts long enough. We're mighty glad to have you here." Over the next hour, Mr. Walsh showed her around and explained her duties. She'd cook breakfast and supper for him, Jake and 4 ranch hands. She'd have a small room off the kitchen, Sundays off, and $20 a month, more than she'd made in Boston. "One more thing," Mr. Walsh said as he walked her to her room. "Some of the boys can be rough around the edges, but they're good men. You have any trouble, you tell me or Jake, especially Jake. He don't tolerate disrespect toward women." That night, Martha cooked her first meal. Beef stew with dumplings, fresh biscuits, and dried apple pie. She put on a clean apron over her dress and rang the dinner bell at 6 o'clock sharp. The ranch hands came in like a small stampede. Young Bobby, barely 20, Red Tom, with his shock of copper hair, Old Pete, who had to be 60 if he was a day, and Charlie, who had kind eyes and a quiet manner. They stopped short when they saw the food, and Martha braced herself for comments. "Miss Henderson," Mr. Walsh said, "these are my men. Boys, this is our new cook, and I expect you to treat her with respect." "Yes, sir," they chorused. Jake was the last to enter. He'd cleaned up, his hair damp from washing, his shirt fresh. When he saw the spread on the table, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. They all ate in near silence, which worried Martha until she noticed the speed at which the food disappeared. Red Tom went back for thirds. Old Pete actually closed his eyes when he bit into the pie. "Miss Henderson," Mr. Walsh said finally, "I believe we've died and gone to heaven." The men murmured agreement, and Martha felt warmth spread through her chest. This was what she was good at. This was where she belonged. Over the following weeks, Martha settled into a rhythm. Up before dawn to start the stove, breakfast at 6, cleaning until lunch, preparing supper, then blessed quiet in her little room. The work was hard, but satisfying in a way her life in Boston had never been. The ranch hands treated her with cautious politeness, like she was a schoolma'am who might rap their knuckles with a ruler. Mr. Walsh was grandfatherly and kind, but Jake was different. He rarely spoke, but she felt his presence like heat from the stove. He was always the first one to stack his plate after meals, the one who fixed her wobbly table without being asked, who brought in extra firewood when the nights turned cold. Once, she'd started to lift a heavy pot, and he'd appeared beside her, wordlessly taking it from her hands. "I can do it," she'd said a bit sharply. She didn't need pity. "I know you can," he'd replied, "but you don't have to." She'd watched him walk away, confused by the ache in her chest. 3 weeks into her tenure, trouble arrived in the form of Colt Harrison and his younger brother Jed. They'd come to buy horses, and Mr. Walsh invited them to stay for supper. Colt was handsome in a slick way, with white teeth and smooth talk. Jed was quieter, though his eyes were hard. They both looked at Martha the way men usually did, with a flicker of surprise, then dismissal. During the meal, Colt dominated the conversation, boasting about his ranch and his horses and his success with women. Martha served the food and tried to be invisible, but when she leaned across to refill Colt's coffee, he shifted back dramatically. "Whoa there, miss. Almost got crushed." He winked at his brother. "Might need to widen these doorways, Walsh." Jed snickered. The ranch hands looked uncomfortable. Mr. Walsh frowned, but Jake went very still. Martha's face burned. She set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. "Excuse me," she murmured and fled to the kitchen. She stood at the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, willing herself not to cry. Stupid. She was stupid to think things would be different here. Stupid to let herself feel safe. The kitchen door swung open. She quickly wiped her eyes. "Martha." It was Jake. He never called her Martha, always Miss Henderson. She didn't turn around. "I'm fine. I just need a moment." "Look at me." Something in his voice made her turn. He stood in the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with an anger that somehow wasn't directed at her. What he said, it was wrong, mean and small and wrong. Martha lifted her chin. "I've heard worse. I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it." He took a step closer. "You shouldn't have to hear any of it." "Well, that's not the world we live in, is it?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "I'm fat, Mr. Brennan. I know what I look like. I know what people think when they see me. You don't have to. You don't know what I think when I see you." The words hung in the air between them. Martha's breath caught. Jake ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Harrison's leaving tonight. He won't bother you again." "Did you?" "I suggested it would be in his best interest to conduct his business elsewhere." He agreed. Jake's expression was grim. Some men need clear suggestions. Despite everything, Martha almost smiled. "Thank you." He nodded and turned to go, then paused at the door. "You make the best biscuits I've ever had. Your stew could make a man weep. And when you smile, really smile, it lights up the whole room." He looked back at her, his eyes steady and serious. "That's what I think when I see you." Then he was gone, leaving Martha standing in the kitchen with her heart pounding and tears streaming down her face. But this time, for an entirely different reason. After that night, something shifted. Jake still didn't talk much, but he started staying after meals to help her wash dishes. They'd work in comfortable silence, or he'd tell her stories about the ranch, about the time a mountain lion got into the hen house, or when Mr. Walsh's prize bull fell in love with a particular oak tree. Martha found herself watching for him, listening for his step on the porch. She started making his favorite foods: spice cake with molasses, chicken with gravy, sourdough bread still warm from the oven. She told herself it was just being a good cook, but her heart knew differently. One evening in late October, Jake found her on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, settling beside her on the steps. "I never knew the sky could be so big." They sat in silence for a while. Then Jake said quietly, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "My wife died 4 years ago, childbirth, the baby too." His voice was rough with old pain. "Sarah was small and delicate, like a china doll. Everyone said we made a handsome couple. They said I was lucky to have caught such a pretty wife." Martha's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry. After she died, I thought I'd never want anyone again. Thought my heart was buried with her." He turned to look at Martha, his storm-grey eyes intense. "Then you stepped off that stagecoach and something inside me woke up. Scared the hell out of me, to be honest." "Jake, I'm not good with words, Martha. Never have been. But I need you to know. When I look at you, I don't see what those idiots see. I see strength. I see kindness. I see a woman who makes this whole ranch feel like home." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "I see the woman I'm falling in love with." Martha couldn't breathe. This had to be a dream, or a cruel joke, or— "You don't have to say anything," Jake continued. "I know I'm just a ranch foreman with nothing much to offer, but I wanted you to know, in case you might feel something too." She found her voice, though it shook. "Why? Why me? Why not you?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Because I'm—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "You could have anyone. Someone beautiful. Someone—" "Martha, stop!" He cupped her face with both hands, making her look at him. "You are beautiful. You're beautiful when you sing while you cook. You're beautiful when you feed scraps to that stray dog you think no one knows about. You are beautiful when you're tired and covered in flour and still smiling at old Pete's terrible jokes." His thumb traced her cheek. "You're beautiful to me, the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." A sob caught in her throat. "People will talk. Let them talk. They'll say horrible things. I don't give a damn what they say." His voice was fierce now. "I've had Pretty, Martha. Pretty didn't keep me warm at night or make me laugh or make me want to be better. You do that, you." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but for once they were good tears. "I never thought anyone would—" "I know, darling, I know." He pulled her against his chest, and she let herself melt into his warmth, into the steady beat of his heart. "But I'm here. I'm real. And if you'll have me, I'm yours." Martha pulled back just enough to look up at him. This strong, quiet man who'd defended her, who'd seen past the surface to the person beneath, who'd somehow found her beautiful. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too." He smiled, a real smile, warm and slightly crooked. "But the best things in life are usually a little bit scary." She thought about the stagecoach ride, leaving everything familiar behind. She thought about stepping into the unknown, into this vast, open land where she'd finally found room to breathe. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll have you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Martha Henderson. I love you too, Jake Brennan." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Redemption Springs. Martha wore a new dress, blue calico with white lace that she'd sewn herself, and carried wildflowers Jake had picked that morning. Mr. Walsh gave her away, beaming like a proud father. The ranch hands sat in the front row, dressed in their Sunday best. When Martha walked down the aisle, she heard the whispers. Of course she did. People would always whisper. But when she reached Jake and saw the look in his eyes, pure love and wonder, the whispers faded away. "You're stunning," he murmured as she took his hand. "So are you." The preacher's words washed over her, and when it came time for the vows, Jake's voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you in sickness and health, for richer or poorer. I promise to stand by your side, to defend you, to choose you every day for the rest of my life. You're my home, Martha, my heart, my everything." Martha's voice shook, but her words were just as true. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to trust in your love even when I'm afraid, to build a life with you in this beautiful, big sky country where I finally learned I was worthy of being loved." When Jake kissed her as his wife, the small congregation erupted in applause. Old Pete wiped his eyes. Mr. Walsh blew his nose into a handkerchief. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns strung between the buildings. Martha had cooked for days: roasted beef, 3 types of pie, fresh bread, and her special wedding cake with vanilla frosting. The ranch hands had polished their boots and practiced dancing, and even Bobby had learned to play a few songs on his harmonica. As the sun set and the stars came out, Jake led Martha onto the makeshift dance floor. She'd never danced in public before, had always been too self-conscious, too aware of taking up space. "I'm not very good at this," she warned. "Then we'll be bad at it together." Jake pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers. "Just follow my lead." They swayed together under the stars, and Martha realized she was laughing. Really, truly laughing, with joy bubbling up from some deep well inside her she hadn't known existed. "Happy?" Jake asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good, because this is just the beginning." Later, when the guests had gone home and the lanterns had burned low, Jake carried Martha across the threshold of the small house Mr. Walsh had given them as a wedding present. 2 rooms attached to the main house with a little porch and a view of the sunrise. He set her down gently, his hands lingering on her waist. "Martha, I need you to know something." "What's that?" "You're not too anything. Not too fat, not too plain, not too much. You're exactly right, exactly perfect, exactly mine." He traced the line of her jaw, his touch reverent. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." She believed him. Finally, she believed. That night, wrapped in her husband's arms, Martha thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Boston and shame and believing she was unlovable, to this desert ranch, where she'd found not just acceptance, but celebration, where a strong, good man looked at her and saw beauty. The next morning she woke to find Jake already up, watching her with that soft expression he wore only for her. "Morning, Mrs. Brennan." "Morning, Mr. Brennan. How do you feel about pancakes for breakfast?" She laughed. "I feel excellent about pancakes." "Good, because I invited Mr. Walsh and the boys. Figured they'd want to hear all about the wedding from my perspective." "Which is?" He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "That I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory, that I married the most incredible woman in the world, and that anyone who says different can answer to me." Over breakfast, with the morning light streaming through the windows and her found family gathered around the table, Martha realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life believing she needed to be smaller, physically, emotionally, in every way, to be worthy of love. But here, in this vast, open land with this quiet, fierce man at her side, she'd learned the truth. She'd never been too much. The world had simply been too small. "More coffee, Jake?" she asked, reaching for the pot. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Always, darling, always." And in the warmth of that kitchen, surrounded by the people who'd become her home, Martha Henderson Brennan smiled, really smiled, knowing that she was exactly where she belonged.